So this is the OpenGL high-rise pack. When you open it up, this is what you'll see. And this is going to be a very quick overview of how the pack works. You typically would not use the pack from the file directly. What you would do is you would append the models that you want to use into the project that you're working on. But we'll look at the models here inside of the pack briefly and kind of go over the directions and some of the functions of the materials in the pack very quickly. Let's take a quick look. This is what you'll see when you open it up. At the top you can see here it has my name on it. However, this is not, you do not need to credit me. This is an open source rights go along with this project, so you can redistribute it as desired. You can change this in any way and share it and improve on it in any way that you want. You do not have to give any credit back to me. Directions here. So you would append the models to new projects. You use any of these buildings and any combinations that you want. There's 8 buildings total in here, and they're separated by scenes, and I'll show you that here in a moment. So each scene, rather they're separated in the scene by layers, so each layer has a different building on it, 8 different layers total. You can change a layer to view each building. I'll show you that in one moment here. You can change the day and the night textures by rerouting the material nodes. So if you look over here, there's a node editor open, and make sure you have the proper building for the proper layer selected. So we're on building number 1. And down here, if I connect my second material here, if we zoom in real quick, you can see that this is the night material, then the one that's connected is the day material. If I swap the day for the night, you'll see that our lighting will change here. You'll see that the windows are illuminated, and we also get a reflective material on here that is fitting of a night city kind of landscape. So again, here's the day texture, and with the day lighting here without illumination, and also the day reflections. And then here, if we switch to the night texture, it changes the illumination so that we have a shadeless illumination here, so that even if we change the lighting, the windows will remain illuminated. Let's also turn on the safety lights. There are some safety lights on these buildings, aircraft safety lights. And you do this by going over to the material in the object in the building called air light. If we click on that, we want to make this material shadeless. And then if we go to the texture tab and we turn on the texture called air light on. If we turn that on, you'll see that these lights will then illuminate. You'll see there's one here at the point of the radio mast here, and then also at the corners of the building. Each building has lights in different locations, and they all use the same material. So if you enable it for one object in your scene, it should turn on for all of them. So again, we have our on the building, we have the night textures are operated from the node editor. So you select the first texture slot, first material slot rather, and you can change that on the node editor from day to night. And then also these lights here, the safety lights can be changed on the air light material. Again, to turn that off, we turn it back to shaded, and then in the texture slot we can turn off the air light on, and that will turn off those lights. So that is the first building, and the settings for the night and the light settings work the same for all of the buildings. So let's take a look now at the other layers. So if we click on the next layer over, we will see the second building. Here's the second building, and a little bit of a different structure to it. You can see that there's a little bit more of a interesting kind of radio mast here, different air handler set up. All of these buildings are very low poly. and kind of square, rectangular type shapes. There's not a lot of complexity in the shapes of the building. The rooftops are really where they differ, and then the layout of the windows is also different on each one. Here is layer number 3, building number 3. Again, to change the building textures to night, you want to make sure that you're also selecting the proper building that you're looking at. So we're on building number 3 here, and then in the node editor I can switch the night textures on, and you can see the windows are illuminated there, and the night reflection is turned on as well. And we can go back to the day, and let's click on building 4, layer 4 for building 4. Here's building 4, a little bit of a different kind of window layout here with a helipad. Building 4, if we enable the night textures, you can see how that shows up. So some parts of it are illuminated a little bit brighter than others. And you can, of course, change the lighting in compositing. You could do a render pass where everything is darkened, no lights, no lighting in the scene, and just the lights turned on. And then you can change the color of that render pass and enable that in compositing as a different color, or change the color of the windows however you like. The illumination is kind of a yellowy kind of glow by default. Let's go to the layer 4 building, or layer 5 building 5. And this is more of a kind of a business high-rise here, and really tall mast on it. And building number 6, run for layer 6. And this one here is a little bit more of an industrial-looking building. And building number 7, there are 8 buildings in total. So here's building number 7. Kind of looks like a an old residential type building. This one does not have any reflections on it. And then building number 8 also has no reflections. Looks a little bit more of a kind of a decrepit, abandoned type building. So these are the 8 buildings. I have here in the instructions in each one of the layers, you can read through this. It's available to you. It explains the changing of the day to night textures by rerouting the material nodes that I went over. It also talks briefly, in case you forget, about enabling the night air warning lights in the material settings over here, air light material. Also have some tips on here. Let me talk briefly about the tips. It suggests here that you use a group associated with a particle system on a plane to generate city blocks. So what you would do is you would append these buildings into your project and group them together, create a group. And then you would use that group on a particle system. And on the particle system on a plane, you would subdivide the plane to get maybe 25 to 80 some vertices, and then you would set your particle system to apply the exact number of particles as there are vertices to the vertices. So you enable the particles to vertices. They start on frame 1, end on frame 1, and then you apply the group as the object to that. You can change the size of the buildings and the rotation to be upright, and you can also add some variation to the size so that the buildings are not all the same size. But anyway, that's how that is done. Andrew Price did a pretty good tutorial on creating buildings, which is a similar kind of method that I used to create these buildings. Mine was a little bit more modular than his kind of solution. It has a few more polygons in it than what he did, but he explains very well how you can set up a city block using a very similar kind of method that I just described here. So another tip, you can light with sun lamps, and that's what I did here. So I used only sun lamps. I used one lamp with shadow and specularity enabled, and that's casting the shadows on here. Maybe if I go back to one of these other layers, you can see a little bit easier. You can see the shadows being cast. So there's one sun lamp doing that. And then I added 2 more sun lamps from the side with the shadow off. So the shadow is disabled and specularity is disabled. And I also used a contrast in color. So the sun lamp is set to a high number, about 2 or 3 in terms of power. and it's kind of an orangey tint, very light orange tint. And then the other two lights coming in from the sides are adding the ambient light without shadow and specularity, and it's kind of a light blue kind of tint to it, which is the opposite color of the orange color on the spectrum, and also gives you the ambient light of a kind of a blue sky ambience. So that's how you do the lighting. You can use point lights as well, but I find that sun lamps work best for lighting a scene kind of like this. You want kind of these stark shadows. Another idea is to use shadeless lighting, which brings us to the next suggestion here. You can increase viewing and render speed by unpacking textures and resizing by 50% in an image editor. So this is a pretty low resolution texture here. These are all completely baked. So all of the texture that you see for the entire building and the material is one texture that has the ambient inclusion already baked into it. There's not multiple layers of textures going on here. There's only one texture. The only place that we have a secondary layer material is in the reflection. So there's a reflection matte and also a layer for the reflection itself. And then also on the night materials, there is a layer for the illuminated lamps as well, and the nighttime texture for the nighttime reflections. But the actual building textures is one huge texture altogether with everything baked into it. So what you can do is you can take those textures, you can unpack them from the blend file, and then if you open them up, all of the textures within the blend file in an image editor, and decrease the size by 50%, you will decrease the resolution. Now that will show up if you get really close to the building, but if you do that, you can actually generate, twice or quadruple the number of buildings and still maintain the same speed. So I've already done this for this blend file. I have really high resolutions of this. I also have ultra low resolutions of this as well for my own use. I'm only giving you this one resolution, which is kind of a medium standard. I went to the lowest resolution possible to still get good results from a distance about like this from the camera. If you get the camera too close, it kind of breaks down, the illusion does. But if you keep the camera back a ways and you're kind of looking at a cityscape, the resolution that I'm giving you here, which is a pretty low resolution, works out pretty well. But yeah, you can make it smaller by editing the textures, and they will automatically load into your blend file the next time without having to change any of the mapping. Just by changing the size of the textures, you can increase your renderability and your preview speed quite a bit. So that's one thing. Now back to the lighting idea. You can also use the models as shadeless and use gradient overlay textures for shadow and lighting. So in my Hacking the Viewport series, in one of my episodes, I talk about shadeless materials and shadeless lighting. You can apply to these materials, say on the main material in the texture slot, you could add a layer with a gradient, and that would generate maybe a gradient black on the bottom to transparent on the top. It would generate the concept of a shadow on the undersides of all the objects. So you can also do the same thing with lighting. If you had an orange to blue gradient left to right, you could generate the idea of an orange light on the left and a bluish light on the right. You can generate shadeless lighting. By doing that, you increase your renderability and your preview speed immensely. So by not using physical lights in the scene and using shadeless lighting, everything speeds up much quicker inside of OpenGL. So that's another tip. I did not do that on any of my examples. I'm using lighting in all of them, and it should work just as well. But if you want to improve speed, that's another thing you can try. And then also here, just a couple of suggestions. Best uses for this pack is for distant city shots, like the examples that you can see here, and motion graphics, non-photoreal kind of situations. You could use this in limited amounts, as integrated VFX elements. So maybe one or two of these buildings in a visual effects shot might be passable and go unnoticed. And you can also use this in limited game use, just because it's low poly, but it is kind of high poly with respect to games. So there's a lot of polygons going on here, and in concept of gameplay, it might be a little bit too complex for gameplay, but might have some limited use in that. So anyway, that's the pack, and those are the generic instructions and some of the generic uses for the pack. So hopefully you find this useful, and I wish all of you happy blending. I want to give you a demonstration of how to put together a scene using the high-rise pack. We're going to delete the default cube here, and we're going to import our models by clicking on the Append option in the menu, and we will open up the GL high-rise pack blend file. From here we can select the object folder, and we're going to select all 8 of our buildings. And to kind of make this go a little bit quicker, I'm just going to select the default lighting that I have in the high-rise pack blend file. So there's 3 lights involved in that: a sunlight and a couple of ambient lights. So select all of those, and then we will click on Append from Library. And what this will do is we'll import all of these objects into our scene. What we want to do now is we're going to separate out the building. So I'll just turn off the lighting for a moment, and then we'll take our buildings, and they are already selected by default. We will move them out of the way, scale them down, and then we're going to move them out of the view from the camera, because we're not actually going to be looking at these buildings. We're going to be looking at a particle system that we're going to create. We'll delete the default light that's in there. One thing that you will notice here, actually after we get our plane put in, let's put in a plane. We're going to subdivide this plane. We're going to subdivide it a few times. So we click on Subdivide, and we're going to subdivide it down to 81 vertices. So if you look here, there's 81 vertices. We're going to create 81 separate buildings with those vertices. So we'll add a particle system. We'll change our particles to 81, start and end on 1. Particle lifetime 250. We want to turn off all emitting velocity. And for the field weights, we're going to set the gravity to 0. So it will generate our buildings as particles, but they will not travel anywhere. We're going to select vertices for our particle distribution and turn off random, so that each vertice will take up 1 building from our group here. Now you'll notice that I have a hard time selecting our buildings. By default from the pack, the selection is disabled. You see, if I try to select, it won't select properly. So we need to turn on our selection ability in the outliner, and now I can select the 8 buildings together. We're going to generate a group, and once we group them together, a new group, we will name the group. We'll call the group Buildings. Now we're going to apply our group to the particle system. We'll select Buildings here, and we'll click on Pick Random and select Rotation so that it follows the rotation orientation of the group. We can increase the size, and then if we increase the random size, it will randomize the size of the buildings to give us a little bit more of an authentic sort of cityscape of different heights among the buildings. If we go to our camera view, we'll try to align our camera here into a better position. Now once we get it lined up where we want to be, we can turn on our texture shading. We'll also need to enable our GLSL shading, because that's the point of this pack, is to be used in GLSL OpenGL. Now, one fair warning here is that it takes a number of seconds to load these textures into OpenGL. The good news is that once they're loaded into OpenGL, it runs very, very quickly, and the preview is very, very smooth and fast. but it does take a little bit of time. A couple of things take time to change settings in OpenGL. One of them being the GLSL mode itself and the texture mode. Another one being lights. So when you change lighting in GLSL mode, those updated changes can take a few seconds to load in. Once they're loaded in, they run very smoothly again, but it takes a little bit of time. Let's bring in a background image here. So we'll just load in kind of a city, see if we can find a city background. I have a few textures in here that might fit the trick. Here's one of New York City. So we'll load this in as shadeless. This is not going to accept lights. And we have our background image organized here. Rotate it into place, scale it up a little bit, and we'll move it down on the z-axis. So we want to try to blend our particle system into the buildings that are in this background image. One way to do that, an additional way to do that, is to also use the mist feature. So what we want to do is turn off the mist for the background image, because we don't want our mist to apply to that. Then we'll go to the world options and select the color chooser, and we'll pick kind of this blue color from the background image to use as our mist. We'll turn on the mist, and you'll notice here as I change the distance to 40 how long it takes for this to update. It takes a little bit of time here for this to update, but once it does update into the OpenGL render engine, you'll see that it moves very quickly as we navigate through the scene. It just takes a few seconds here for this to load into the engine, and once it's in there, we're good to go. Of course, every time we change our distance settings, it will have to update again. So here we have our mist. You can see a little bit of a fall off here. So as the buildings move away from the camera, you can see that they are occluded by this mist layer. Let's try to move it in a little bit. So we'll set it to 30. Again, it takes a few seconds for this to load in. Once it loads in, we can navigate through the scene fine. We can change the settings of our particle system as well to get just the right seed for our particle system. We can move around our buildings and get a different building configuration. So let's select the plane, go back to the particle settings, and what we're going to do is we're going to click on the seed and we'll move it, and you see how quickly this loads. It moves very, very fast. So we'll find a random seed here that maybe looks more appropriate. You can also convert your particle system. If you go to the modifier stack, if you click on convert for the particle system, it will turn all of these buildings into solid objects in the scene. Now once you do that, you can't change the particle seed anymore, so you're stuck with whatever you end up with there. It may be better to just keep the particle system and render from that. If we hit the render button, you'll see how quickly this renders. It only takes a couple of seconds. We get a full frame. It renders very, very quickly in the scene. And you can see this mist fall off in the image, making it very difficult to see where the end of our particle system ends and where the background image begins, which is kind of the goal. We can then maybe set a camera movement here and set up a camera move if we're creating an animation. So we'll set our frames to 120, and we'll just move our camera around on the X and Y axis, change the rotation a little bit, come up with a some sort of a camera move. Now we can play back our camera move, and you can see it moves a little slowly. It doesn't move in exact real time, but it is an acceptable preview speed as it's rendering through here. Now, one trick you can do is if you take all of the textures from the pack and unpack them, you can alter them in a photo editor and reduce them perhaps by 50%, and that would increase your preview time if the resolution of the textures was half of what it is now. And with the objects at the distance they are from the camera, I don't think that it would be quite as noticeable. You could probably get away with half resolution in that situation. But otherwise, I think it certainly moves efficiently and quickly enough. So maybe we want to change our lighting around a little bit. You'll notice that some of these shadows aren't casting properly. So we'll move our sun down a little bit so that the clipping picks up on the objects a little bit better. We're getting more accurate shadow casting. Once you have light settings created, they can be moved around in the scene very easily without any delay. However, changing the settings of the lights can take a little bit of time to update, just the same as changing the mist settings as I'm doing here. So we'll change the mist settings and pull it back to a lower beginning clip value. And there we go. And now we can take a look at the light settings here. Before we mess with the light settings, let's decrease the number of particles here. And what that will do is, if we decrease it down to, say, 70, we'll be able to add some more realistic gaps here between the buildings. We'll also change the size and the random size a little bit, see if we can get a little bit more of a realistic layout. Check back here at the beginning of our animation, go to the end of the animation, see how it looks. And maybe change the seed here, see if we can find a better combination. Now, one benefit to making these all, separating these from the particle system, is that by doing that you would be able to then further rotate the buildings. Right now the buildings are all in the same rotation. Which, you know, it may not be noticeable, but in some cases it might be, and you may want to convert everything to solid objects so you can rotate some of the buildings 90 degrees, make it look a bit better. Let's try a night scene here. So we're going to find a night city texture. I think I have one here. We'll replace our background image with the night texture, and we'll now need to change our lighting to match, and we'll also need to change our mist. So if we go to the mist layer here, we'll select a color in the background that looks more like the mist that's in there, more of a gray, and we will change our values to update. And again, the mist is a little bit of a delay in loading in, so you have to be patient as you change some of these settings with the mist and with the lights. We'll give it a couple seconds, and then we should see this update. We'll see that blue color disappear, and it will be replaced by the more of a gray tone. And I have a feeling we're going to need to turn. Yes, you can see in the background there, it's a little too much. We'll have to turn that back in a moment. Let's change the lighting. So we're going to turn our sun lamp way down, so from 1.5 to 0.5, so there'll be minimal shadow cast in there. We're not going to really want to see too many of the features of the buildings. We're going to illuminate them, turn on the night textures and the night materials with the windows illuminated. So you can see here that lamps in OpenGL take some time to update, and that is another thing you have to wait for. So between the mist and the lamps, there's a little bit of waiting to load something in. But again, once it does load in, you can move about quite freely and quickly once that's loaded into the render engine. So let's select the ambient lighting. And just a quick note about the lighting here as I turn these down. There are 3 lamps in here. There is a sun lamp that is casting the shadow forward, facing from the back. Then there's 2 sun lamps that have shadows disabled, and they are very, very low power, light blue color, and they are coming in from the left and the right. And they're just adding kind of an ambient lighting to the building, so that the parts of the buildings that are directly opposite from the sun lamp are still getting some ambient illumination. So you have to add these in there. And I use sun lamps to do that because they will illuminate through the full distance of the scene, unlike point lights. Point lights have a fall off. The sun lamps do not. So sun lamps seem to work a little bit better for that kind of ambient lighting, and you really only need 2 or 3 of them, 3 at the most. So we've changed our sun lamp settings. We've got more of an appropriate lighting. We'll need to change that mist here in a moment. Let's turn on our night texture. So we'll open up the node editor and give ourselves some space here. And you can see that for each building we have 2 material options, a day and a night one. So we'll select our first building and enable the night lights, and you can see that the night textures turn on for that one, and then we click on the next building. And because we're using particle system, all we have to do is change it for each one of these buildings, and it will update for the entire scene for each of those buildings. So we'll go through here and turn all of the night materials on, illuminating the lights. You'll notice that the color is kind of a yellowy glow, which looks a little gamey. You can change that to some degree. I'll show you that in a moment, but you can go into the material settings and apply the that particular material here as a multiply rather than as a cross blend. We need to turn on the night lights. So if we go to the night light material and we make it shadeless, and then turn on the texture associated with it, air light on. And by enabling this, you can see that the lights, the air lights, will turn on for all of the buildings, because all of the buildings are using the same material. Now if we look at the windows here, the night glow, you can see what we can do is we can select the texture, and if we select the texture, we can change it to a multiply mode. And because it's a color, it will multiply kind of funny. It'd be better if it was a white color, I suppose. If I had to redo this, I might make the glowing a white. But we'll turn up the material color underneath that glowing texture, bring it up to a lighter color, and you can see how it affects the building that it's affecting here in the foreground. And we can also maybe change the color of it, and that will work against or with the yellow color. See how it kind of neutralizes it and turns down the tone. So you can change this for the different buildings. If you want buildings to have a slightly different tone in terms of illumination from each other, you can change these around. So we'll play around with this a little bit in each of the buildings and kind of give a little bit more diversity. You could, if you wanted to, unpack these textures and maybe change your glow texture to a white rather than a yellow. And if it's a white color, you could just load it as a multiply, and then you can choose the color of your lighting for each building outright. Let's pick another building here, do the same thing. So set it to multiply, and you can see it's this center building here. We'll go to the material color and turn it up. And if it's a white, it will appear the same as it was before. If we alter the color, it should kind of tweak the coloring a little bit. So let's pick kind of a pinky color. Gives it more of an orange sort of look to it. So if we pick a blue color, it will neutralize the yellow a little bit because it sits on the opposite side of the color spectrum. It starts to turn green. That's a little undesirable. So maybe right about here, just kind of neutralize that color a little bit, give it more of a lighter yellow color. Turn it all the way up. Full brightness. We can turn it down to give it more of a muted glow, as if there's maybe coverings on the windows. And you can see how this looks here. If you look in the background, I'm a little displeased with the mist, so let's fix that here. We need to render this, see what it looks like. Yeah, you can see how the mist fall off doesn't look very good. The buildings are turning kind of gray in the background there, so Let's go to the world options and select our mist layer. We're going to bump this back to 40. And we want to make the back edge disappear so that we can't see where the end of our particle system ends and where the background image begins. That's the goal. So if we just turn this up a little bit, we should be able to accomplish that goal. And again, we have to wait for it to load. And the mist takes a minute. You can see, oh, that looks a lot better. So now we're starting to mask or disguise that line there where the three-dimensional objects end and the two-dimensional image begins. So I think that that works pretty well for the purposes of this tutorial. You can see how that works out there. So that's pretty much everything that I need to show you in terms of using this pack. You can also use this in the Gooseberry version of Blender that's out right now that has additional features. One of the features is a depth of field, so that you could perhaps get depth of field into your shot so that the foreground buildings are a little out of focus and the far background buildings are out of focus, and then you have just a plane of sight that's in focus to add a little bit more realism. Also, you could do some frame interpolation or oversample your animation to add some motion blur. You could add other assets in there to increase the realism, maybe some atmospheric two-dimensional assets, smoke, things like that. So lots of things that you can do to use this in your projects, and I hope that you find this useful. I hope you have fun with this pack, and please, if you update it in any way, please let me know so I can partake in your updates and use it also for myself. So this has an open license. You can do whatever you want with it, redistribute, change it in any way, use it in whatever projects you wish, and just have fun with it. So good luck with this, and I wish all of you happy blending.